Hello and welcome to part 3 of the Emotions mini-series, How to Process Emotions. In today's episode, we're going to be learning how to process the emotion of sadness. Sadness can feel like quite a complicated emotion. Perhaps we feel like sometimes we're drowning in emotions, and other times we feel completely numb. We really want to learn how to identify and work with this emotion. In a world that praises productivity and positivity, it can feel like there's no real space for sadness. And I'm hoping that this video is going to reframe that narrative for you. Life is ebb and flow. We're not meant to be up and on all the time. It's not sustainable. And sadness, when we work with it consciously, sadness can be an invitation inwards. We have a lot of connotations to low moods in our society. For most of us, we automatically judge a lower mood as being negative or bad, as opposed to seeing it as a natural part of life. Imagine for a moment, just like the winter prepares the earth for the blossoming of spring, so too does sadness prepare the mind and the body for expansion. Oftentimes, we experience sadness just before massive change or expansion. It's kind of like that forced cocoon chrysalis phase that the butterfly needs to go in order to transform and come out as the butterfly. If we start to relate to sadness in this way, it opens up a whole new world for us. And we recognize instead of drowning in emotions, we can actually become powerful, conscious surfers of this emotion. We need to be able to ride that wave as opposed to numbing or suppressing or avoiding it. We need to be able to sit with the discomfort of sadness in order to move out and through the other side, renewed and rejuvenated. Think of sadness as your purifier emotion. It helps to cleanse the body and make space for new things. If we numb our sadness, we're also numbing our ability to feel joy and happiness and love. So it's important to clean the filters out so that we can truly experience the full range of human emotions. Our very clever limbic system holds our perception of reality in place. Whenever we undergo a massive change or transition, we need to form new neurological pathways to update and upgrade our map of reality. And sadness allows us the space of recalibration. So we're going to be looking at 2 types of sadness in today's video. The first type of sadness is nurturative sadness. This is the type of sadness we experience when we're undergoing loss or disappointment, when we receive really bad news or someone passes away. And this type of sadness can feel really overwhelming, almost like we're going deep into that cave of despair. This is a necessary part of being able to move out of the darkness and out of the hardship and find ourselves anew on the other side. With this type of sadness, it's really important to move through the grief cycle, recognizing that we cannot skip any step, and bypassing it only prolongs the state. It's really hard to imagine after a tremendous loss how on earth we're going to live again. But sadness allows us a safe space to renew and to reformulate our experience of reality. As long as we're living and breathing, we are here. And instead of living a half life, why not learn to work with this emotion in a conscious way, recognizing all of the incredible benefits that it gives us. Like all of our other emotions, we'll have a particular imprint of how we experience sadness. When we were little babies, the only way that we had to communicate our needs was through crying. But if we were ignored or neglected, think of the message that this sent our young developing minds. That our needs are not important, that the world is not a safe space. That's a pretty depressing thought. And that brings us to the second type of sadness. This is habitual sadness. With habitual sadness, we've created an identity around this emotion. I call this the Eeyore syndrome, where life feels kind of gray, and no matter how wonderful things are, you can't help but defaulting back into this low or heavy mood. Chronic habitual sadness can lead to things like depression or mood disorders, but it's also important to check some biological factors like gut health or hormone imbalances. In today's world, we all too quickly label these lower states as bad or depressive episodes, as opposed to recognizing their unique function and working with them. So it's really important to start to change this relationship with this emotion. Instead of seeing it as a negative emotion that you need to get rid of or suppress, rather understand that it is that deep invitation within in order for you to upgrade and expand your worldview. In my program Wayfinder, we go into a lot more detail on how how to become a masterful state shifter. This will really help you if you are suffering from that habitual sadness. In order to step out of it, we need to create new and conscious states of being so that the brain has some other options instead of just defaulting back into that sadness. No one wants to live in a perpetual winter. We want to be able to move through our winter, allowing and honoring as long as it takes in order to naturally come out into our spring. For most of us, we'll have some preconceived ideas or beliefs around this emotion that we've received from society or from our families. So I want you to take a moment and just check in. What do you believe about this emotion? Do you believe that sadness is a weakness? That crying is a waste of time? I want you to just take a moment and check in with your current beliefs around this emotion. Our behaviors come from our deepest beliefs. So if we keep finding ourselves in the deep, dark winter, it's really important for us to check in with some of those beliefs and ask ourselves, are we actually allowing ourselves to be fully with this emotion of sadness? The only way out is through. When we recognize this, we can stop fighting that current and learn to swim. Or better yet, become a magnificent surfer. For being able to ride this emotion and allowing it to unfold as need be, while staying resourceful and clear at the same time. Crying is a powerful way to cleanse and clear the body. Scientists have found that if you look at tears under a microscope, you can actually see which emotion is being cleared through that tear. Was it an angry tear? Was it a tear released by immense grief? Or was it tears of joy? How amazing is it that we have this cleansing elixir within us, and all we're needing to do is allow it to move out through the body, uninhibited and unjudged. Allowing our tears to move freely out of the body creates immense liberation and frees us up to feel the full spectrum of human emotions. When we truly learn to work with this emotion of sadness, it's kind of like lying on your back and being held by the water, feeling completely light, held, and safe. So it's time to drop that toxic BS that you have to be in and on all the time, and really allow yourself to drop into the truth of the moment. One of the biggest game changers for me was learning to lean in when I felt sad. One of our most fundamental human needs is for connection. But if the message that we received as children was that no matter how hard we cried, our needs wouldn't be met, it would make complete sense that we would become quite self-reliant or resilient in order to cope with the disappointment of not having our needs met. So for me, some of the messages that I learned around sadness was that there was no time or space for sadness to be felt. That the only way that I'd truly be accepted is if I had a smile on my face and a positive attitude. So every single time I started to feel that low mood, I would self-isolate and retreat. What that really does is it continues to send the message that your need for connection will not be met. So a massive game changer for me was learning to lean in when I felt sad. As soon as the sad emotion would arise, to be able to lean in and ask for a hug, for a cuddle, or just having a friendly ear to listen, started to give me new evidence that I was allowed to feel this emotion and that my needs would be met. For many of us, lack of connection is one of our deep roots of sadness. Feeling alone, feeling isolated can create an overwhelming amount of sadness in the body. And even now, we may feel connected through the internet, but if we're not physically being held or touched, sense of connection can feel quite distant. Whenever we are hugged, the body releases oxytocin. This is our love hormone. If we're not allowing ourselves to be touched or held, we're starving the body of this incredible emotion, which can cause a wide variety of issues. So it's really important to start to cultivate true and safe connections. And one of the first places we can start is with ourselves. One of my favorite somatic tools that I want to share with you today is the butterfly breathing exercise. So taking the hands, interlinking the thumbs, and placing them on the chest like this. You can start to rhythmically tap as you alternate with your breathing. Breathing in and exhaling out. What this does on a very deep level is it resets the sympathetic nervous system from that fight or flight mode to the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. It allows the body to feel held and to feel safe. So here's some tips and tools to be able to work with this emotion of sadness. Tip number 1, drop the stigma that you hold around this emotion. Feeling a lower emotion is not a bad thing. Just like winter is not bad, it just is. So are these so-called lower emotions. Going in and sitting with your sadness is not wallowing. Wallowing is actually where we get stuck in the story mind about what we're feeling, but we're not actually processing the emotion itself. We can actually sit with this emotion more consciously. Tip number 2, make the time to feel this emotion. If you start to feel sadness coming up, start to identify how it shows up for you. Perhaps it feels like a heaviness, or everything starts to feel a little bit gray or dull. Notice how sadness shows up for you. And instead of avoiding it or distracting yourself from it, give yourself permission to pause and be with this emotion. And there's a variety of ways that we can do this. Movement is a really powerful way to move sadness out through the body. So things like dance, like freestyle movement, really just finding that flow can be greatly beneficial to moving this emotion out of the body. Another way to work with this emotion is through creative expression. Whether it just be doodling on the page or wildly throwing paint at a canvas, start to find some creative outlets for you to express this emotion of sadness. Some of the greatest works of art have been created from deep sorrow and loss. Spend time in nature. When we immerse ourselves in nature, we start to feel connected to something greater than ourselves. So even if we're not getting that human connection, connecting to nature can help us feel part of the greater tapestry of life. Getting outdoors and enough sunlight can also help to produce serotonin and help to build all our happy hormones. Another tip to help you process this emotion of sadness is learning to cry it out. The first step to this is cleaning out any negative connotation that you have to crying and allow yourself to turn on the waterworks, recognizing that it's helping to purify the body. Remember to detach yourself from the story that's playing out and rather stay with the emotion in the body. Some useful ways to be able to learn to cry it out is by listening to music that activates that sensation. You can watch sad movies or carving out periods of time where you allow yourself to cry it out. So say, for example, you give yourself a 15-minute window and you sit on your bed and you allow yourself to really reach into the depth of all of that unprocessed sadness, giving yourself permission for the next 15 minutes to allow yourself to truly and deeply feel the emotion. And after those 15 minutes, taking a nice deep breath in, placing your hand on your chest, and moving on with your day. So these are just some ways to start to work with this emotion in different ways. If you're curious to learn how to change your relationship even more deeply with this emotion, then definitely check out my new course, Wayfinder, where we really learn to delve deep with 5 of our major emotions. If this video resonated with you, then make sure to like and subscribe to be notified for future videos. This is only part 3 of a 7-part series. And next up, we're going to be learning how to process the emotion of fear. So stay tuned.